Okay guys, and welcome back to Fast Jet Performance. My name's Tim Davies. Now, I've just been out to the Beechcraft factory in the United States to look at an aircraft called the T6C Texan II that we've just bought for the Royal Air Force. And pretty much I'd like to show you my journey there and then talk to you a little bit about the aircraft. Roll VT. That's where it kind of stops really, and there's a reason for this. This badge I'm going to show you here, this is called an ITAR restricted badge, and that's a pretty serious thing. I'm going to refer to some notes I've made to really tell you a bit about this badge and what that actually means. ITAR is International Traffic in Arms Regulation, a set of regulation that governs the United States government export and import of defense-related materials. Now, when I got to their factory in Wichita and I saw that they were under ITAR control, it made me realise that I was not going to be able to film in or around the aircraft or the factory at all. Fine, I thought. So I spoke to them and said, look, have you got any kind of media stuff, MCA, media communication officer, that kind of thing, that can provide us with some details? Because the company that's bringing this aircraft in for us needs to write a lot of courseware, and so they need kind of in-depth pictures of the inside of the aircraft so they can use them for their splash screens and this sort of thing. And I was firmly told, no, we don't really have anything that you can use, but anything you find online is fine. I found some stuff online. So why is this important to us then? Well, really, the only picture I've got of the airplane that I was allowed to take is this one. This is as one of our guys was starting up. So there was about 5 of us out there at the time, and we basically all went out there to have a look. So the party that we were made up of was a guy from Central Flying School. There was a guy who was flying Tucanos, very senior guy as well. Both those guys then were going to fly this airplane and report back about how similar it was and how we're going to fit it into the training system. Then there was a training manager from Ascent Flight Training, and we'll talk a little bit about their role in a minute. He was out there because he's responsible for bringing that aircraft in, and there was another guy with him who was the aircraft sort of specialist, as it were, for this particular platform, a very senior guy with a lot of hours in military fast jets and those kind of aircraft that we're bringing in. So I was out there really as a bit of a spare thumb, as it were, a bit of a spare piece, and I was there to assure the process for the Royal Air Force. Now, why do I have to do that? Well, the truth is that back in 2006, the Treasury realised that it couldn't forecast costs of military flying training. They were exceptionally expensive and they were changing year on year. So what it did is it went into a PFI, or a private financed initiative, where it bid for the whole of the United Kingdom military flying training system for the next 25 years. The bid was about $3.2 billion. It was going to equate, and these figures don't really match up, but there's reasons for this. I don't want to get into the nuances of such, but it worked out about £500 million per year for 25 years. The company that won was a company called Ascent Flight Training, made up of Lockheed Martin and Babcock Defence Services. Those two combined to make this one company. That company then is responsible for the whole of the United Kingdom military flying training system for 25 years. However, the Ministry of Defence still holds the operational risk. What does that mean? And I want to look at the airplane in a minute, so I want to get deep dive into this, but it's kind of important. It means the Ministry of Defence is still responsible for putting that guy in the Typhoon to defend the sovereign UK. If Ascent fail, then we still don't get a guy in that Typhoon. So we have to be very careful. We have to assure ourselves that what Ascent Flight Training are doing is conducive to the aims of the UK government. So my role was to go out there, sit down with our, what we call the authority side, so the Air Force side, who are going to fly this airplane, and also sit down with Ascent Flight Training, who are going to bring this aircraft in and make sure that what they're delivering is going to be conducive to our expectations. I was like the school teacher, if you will. Yeah. Bit weird. Anyway, so let's talk about the jet, shall we? Boom, and it is a jet because it's a turboprop. Technically it's a jet, isn't it? Let's go back in time a little bit. So back in 2014, a company called Affinity, who are used by Ascent Flight Training to go and buy all the aircraft and bring those aircraft into service. They won the bid. Well, they didn't win a bid. They went to Beechcraft and said, we want 10 airplanes, please. And that contract was signed. The T6 is going to replace the Shorts Tucano that we currently use. There was about 130 Tucanos bought back in '89, I believe it was. There was 116 Hawk T1s bought back in 1977. So this aircraft that we're bringing now, pretty revolutionary really. It's going to replace the Tucano, and it's going to go on and lead into, not the T1, because that's flying in different capacity now. It's not in the flying training system anymore, but I still run that aircraft as a requirement space issue. That's another thing we'll talk about. It's going to lead into the Hawk T2. We're getting quite nuanced, aren't we? We're getting quite depthy. Let's talk about the little airplane, shall we? Okay, so this airplane will come in 2018. We're going to buy 10 of them. We may have to buy some more, and the reason we might have to buy some more is the figures that were initially done, this must be a tedious video to watch, we've got lots of jets flying around, was on figures for 2010 figures for how many aircrew we're going to need to come through for the Royal Navy and the Royal Air Force. These are forecasted figures. Now what happened is there was another Strategic Defence and Security Review in 2015. Those figures changed. Changing those figures and maybe allowing for something called international defence training, where we train other people's militaries, means that maybe the number of aircraft we're buying might have to change. That's not my issue. As a requirements manager, I set the requirement, and that's what we're going to talk about for a second real quick. What I do then, as well as flying on the Hawk T2, is I also run the whole of the fixed wing requirements space. Now, there are many different requirements managers. There's courseware, someone responsible for all courseware for UKM FDS, someone responsible for all the rear crew for UKM FDS, someone responsible for all the rotary, someone for the multi-engine, someone from RPAS, which is remotely piloted air systems vehicles, that's me, and someone also that does the fixed wing. And when I talk about fixed wing, this is what I do, I'm talking about fast jet and multis in effect in the same thing. So I look after 3 platforms, which is the Grob 120 TP, that we're buying from Grob in Bavaria. I went out to see that a few months ago. I also look after this aircraft, the Beechcraft T6C Texan II, and I also look after the Embraer Phenom 100. It's kind of combined in the fixed wing. Anything with fixed wings I kind of look after. Cool. What else then? So, why did we not buy anything else? Why did we buy the T6? Well, what we've done is abdicate responsibility for all that stuff to Ascent Flight Training. They're responsible for the innovation, and we have to allow them to do that. Why don't we buy the PC-21, you might ask? Well, that costs twice as much. Do I get twice as much performance from an aircraft that flies about 370 knots, I think it is, for the PC-21? Max speed of this aircraft, T6, is about 316 knots. Is the, you know, let's work it out really. You know, another 50 knots, is it really worth doubling the price of the aircraft? Probably not. And this little T6, actually, is a bit of a workhorse. And speaking of Beechcraft, they're nice guys, so I don't mind buying it. Anyway, each one of these T6s then cost about £4 million. Ascent Flight Training have bought 10 of them, as I said, and after about 5 years, the Air Force then owns those aircraft. It's a bit of a crazy deal. Cool. Actually, Beechcraft have built about 850 of these aircraft so far, and they've delivered them to many countries. In fact, who's flying the aircraft right now? Let's have a look, shall we? My mouse is a bit squeaky. So at the moment, the United States Air Force is flying the A variant. The United States Navy is flying the B variant. The difference between the B and the C really is only hard points on the wing. Everything between the B and the C, avionics-wise, is the same. Canada has the aircraft, so does Greece, so does Israel, so does Iraq, so does Morocco, so does Mexico. Have I forgotten anyone? New Zealand. I'm speaking to some guys out in New Zealand right now about crosswind landings. Very interesting. Very interesting Air Force, actually. They've taken some knocks. I used to fly a lot of New Zealand pilots here, and they got rid of the A4 Skyhawk. We put them on the Typhoons and all sorts of stuff. Great guys, all of them. Love New Zealanders. And of course, we are going to buy this airplane as well, buying 10 of them. Okay, it has a turboprop engine. What does that mean? Turboprop engine, basically it converts high RPM and low torque to low RPM but high torque. It pretty much does that through a suitable system of levers and gears. The prop is free in effect, it's a free turbine. You can hold the prop while this engine starts, but as soon as you let that prop go and it starts spinning, you want to get the hell out of the way, okay? It's 4-bladed Hartzell propeller. Let's talk about the T6 a bit more then. So it's going to cruise around at about 280 knots, but we're not really going to do that. In the upper air, we're probably going to use about 210. In low level, we're probably going to use about 240 knots, I'm thinking. It's a +7 to -3.5G aircraft. I've got some notes here. Pretty much about 1,000 nautical miles range in the cruise. Now, we bought the C model. We can put some tanks on the bottom of that if we really want to and extend that range. We haven't ordered it with tanks at the moment, but we can. Right, it's got a full flight mission system inside it. 3 screens. I'll try and bring it up now. This was a video that someone did of a simulator, which is quite impressive. I thought I'd use this video. 3 screens, you can put a lot of stuff up there. Interesting though, no autopilot, but that's fine. We don't necessarily need that. Does have a head-up display in the front cockpit only. Kind of a steep cockpit, but not that steep. But the visibility from the back, I've been assured by the guys that were flying the aircraft, is pretty sweet. Does not have ABS. They are making a version with ABS, which we call anti-skid, really, in Air Force parlance. What else does it have? Has a very narrow undercarriage tract, which means that we're probably going to see some crosswind issues with landing. It's only got 10 knots wet crosswind landing clearance. We're going to put it at valley, where there are always a lot of crosswinds. We'll see how that works out. And the runway is it wet? Is it shiny? The definition will change. 25 knot crosswind otherwise. Does have nose wheel steering. Nose wheel steering is disconnected for takeoff and landing. Use for taxiing only. Let's have a look. The architecture of the avionics then is very civilian. And what do I mean by that? It's really designed for IFR, instrument flight rules, from getting from one airfield to another. And when I was playing on their system to have a look at it, it was difficult really it wasn't that intuitive. It was in a tactical kind of sense. So we're already discussing kind of workarounds about, we can put a route on it, we can put a moving map on it, we're going to put ground proximity warning system on it as well, which is something else that they're quite excited about doing because they haven't done that yet. That should keep the guys from flying into the ground. It does have a radar altimeter on it. But the architecture really is for getting airborne out of Wichita and then heading over to another local airfield and putting all that kind of IFR stuff in it, all the approaches in it, which is something that we don't tend to do too much of in the Air Force. So we have a route, we can steer through routes and waypoints. It has hands-on throttle and stick. As I said, multiple different maps. Has stores management system, which allows us to configure some dumb weaponry and the gun, the strafe. We're not going to put live arm on it, but we can strafe. It has full synthetic air-to-ground and air-to-air solutions, but does not have a synthetic radar. It has a trim aid device, which means you don't need to trim out the forces and the rudder the whole time. It does that automatically for you. Although because we're in Air Force, we're thinking, do we remove that and test the capacity of the student? And we're like, why would you bother? And when you speak to the test pilots, they're like, guys, come on, this is ridiculous. What are you doing? But we do that because we're in Air Force and we're a bit silly sometimes. The climb to 15,000 feet though just takes it 6 minutes, which is pretty good. It's going to fly at the valley, as I said, and the airspace is very congested up there, so that's not a bad thing. Right, let's have a look at the ejection seat then. It's a pretty good seat then. It's what is it? It's a US 16LA, I believe. I'm just going to look at my notes. Yes, US 16LA. They've made 1,600 of these seats before. There's first ejection was on 21st of August back in 2000. Both guys were saved. It saved 11 aircrews so far. It's a great seat. However, there are issues with this, and that's because initially, when the aircraft comes into service, it's going to come into service with something called a skeletal torso harness. These are the ones you see in the F-16s and all that kind of stuff, where the seat is literally clipped onto you. You wear something, I'll put a picture up here now, and you clip that to you. Now, the problem that the Air Force has with this is that we don't use this system. We use something called the simplified combined harness, which is where you just drag the straps over and it all goes into a central point in the middle and everything locks in there, and that's what we've done for years. So we're bringing an aircraft in now that doesn't have this. We have something called duty delivery holders, which tends to be station commanders on station that hold the wrist to life. Now, when you start talking about the wrist to life, some of these guys think that maybe having 2 different systems on the same station may increase that risk to life, increase the people being killed. So they want to change that midway through, bring the seat in with the skeletal torso harness and then change it into the simplified combined harness, which is, it's expensive, guys, I ain't gonna lie to you. It's not cheap, it's not cheap. Right, so we're gonna bring this aircraft in with the full aircrew equipment assembly, so all the helmet and mask and everything else, and the harness. It's going to be American. Everything's American. That's a problem for us. We're going to have to work it out. Okay, now, what Beechcraft have done is they've registered this aircraft with the FAA, and they've done that on purpose so they can sell it into civilian markets if they need to. Their aircraft are civilian registered, and I think you'll see a picture of one of their aircraft here. We're going to put them on the military register, which means we have to write a release of service for these aircraft, which is a lot of work. And at the moment, I've got guys writing the flight reference cards for this, because the books that they have, 3 massive, huge books, and their own TPs admit that it's just ridiculous. And what the FAA insisted they do is write procedures into these manuals. So they write procedures about how to fly like a glide circuit or a practice force landing, and that's not really what the manufacturer should be telling us. They're pretty cool, and there are some issues with this. So, for example, when the jet gets airborne, once you have landing flaps. So the problem with landing flap is that if you're doing a touch and go, you touch the ground and then you take off again, you'll travel the gear up, and as the gear travels up, you'll travel that flap from from landing flap on this aircraft. It has 2 stages, takeoff and landing flap. That's all that it has. You'll travel it from landing flap to up. Now, as it goes from landing flap to takeoff flap, it will sound a gear horn. It has a horn, it just makes a horn noise. Very similar to what our T2 does, really, with the ground proximity warning system. So I'll just play that video now real quick.
That's us. Positive climb, gear travels, flap travels.
Pull up, pull up.
So is that a snag? Well, it was an FAA thing that they had to put in there. Yeah, it might cause us a snag. We're going to work around it. I don't think it's a drama. The guys flew it, said no, it's not a drama. But it has, as I said, takeoff and landing flap, and that's an issue for us because as we go downwind in the Hawk, we roll out and we just take what's called mid flap. In the Hawk, we have mid, 3/4 and down. 3/4 is only ever used for taking off on a short runway in the Hawk T2. But as we roll out downwind, then we do say speed below 200, air brake in, just check it's in, and then we travel flap to mid flap. So now we're saying, well, do we do the same thing with the T6 because that's what they do on the Hawk? And my roll out there, as well as the CFS roll and the guy from Tucanos was saying, well, hang on a second, are we going to embrace this aircraft, or do we just do what we've always done and use it legacy? So we're trying to really embrace that, and we're saying to TPs, test pilots, what do you guys do? And they say, well, why do you take takeoff flap downwind? Take landing flap downwind, you're going to be good for it. So that's what we're going to look to do. Is you roll downwind, you just take landing flap. There's very minimal trim changes in the aircraft, and you're just going to power up against that tip final, and then you're going to land with down flap. Someone's going to mess that up in the Air Force, I guarantee it. Okay, other things we're looking at is, are we going to spin? If you let go of this thing, it comes out of a spin. The nose drops and it sorts itself out. There is a spin recovery using opposite rudder. Right now we have spin as a currency. That is a problem. Now, do we keep spin as a currency? The TPs were saying, why bother? You let go of it, it's going to come out. We've got to decide all these things at some point. Are we going to do low level in this aircraft? Yes, we probably are. Are we doing low level on the front line right now? Not as much as we used to. Okay. Are we going to drop down weaponry? Do we drop down weaponry on the front line? No. Are we going to do it in this airplane? Well, this is the thing, you know, because it builds capacity, targeting at low level. But do we do that? It doesn't have any relevance on the front line. So do we still do that now? I don't know. We're going to work this out. Do we do basic fighting maneuvers, air combat? Do we do strafe attacks? This is basic flying training. This is not advanced flying training. But the problem is we've got an aircraft now that can deal with these things. It's a very clever platform, like the Grob. Just because you have a clever platform, does that mean our students are that clever enough to use it? I mean, what we're probably going to have to do is download a lot of training from the Hawk T2, and that's a whole other conversation. I don't want this tape to run on too long, by the way, so I'm going to cut it short in a minute. Our instructors on this airplane will largely be multi-engine pilots, and that generally is what happens the world over. The multi-engine pilots come and they fly this aircraft and they teach our students. Now, this is going to be difficult because some multi-engine pilots find the Tucano difficult, and this thing is like a Tucano on steroids. It could max guys out. Now, ascent flight training going to be responsible for having 7 of these pilots, I believe, and the Air Force is going to put another 14 in. We've got to find 14 pilots that are going to be able to fly this airplane, and right now none of them are going to be fast jet mates because we just don't have the capacity to put fast jet mates onto this aircraft right now, because like the USAF, we're kind of a bit low in numbers right now. Nothing like the USAF is low in numbers, but the Air Force is low in numbers. You want to join the Air Force, put your application in, because we need good guys and girls. Okay, we talked about crosswind landings then, and let's have a quick talk about crosswind landings again, just quickly. As we said, 10 knots in the wet, 25 knots in the dry. And why is that? It's not great at crosswind landings, and I think I found out why. Because if you look at the bottom of this picture here, you can see there's the Hawk T2 has like this. Have you put the drop tank on the bottom of the Hawk T2, and it kind of acts like a ventral fin. And if you look on the The T6 at the very back then, it has another ventral fin, and that improves lateral stability. However, in doing so, you've also got this thing that's going to weathercock the aircraft into the ground when you start kicking off drift and everything. So it does have a problem. Couple that with the close-in undercarriage, the very narrow tract of undercarriage, and the fact that the wheels are very, very narrow as well. And I think we're going to see some crosswind issues with this airplane. So that's something we're going to have a look at, okay? That's pretty much it. I know there's a lot more I can give you, and by all means, if you want to hook up in the comments here, type some things in there. I'll try my best to answer those for you, but hopefully you've enjoyed the video. Sorry that we couldn't do any flying with the jet out there, but really I don't want to end up in jail. So I hope you got a lot from this. Any questions, as I said, just hook me up there, or hashtag AskFJP, and we'll try and get on it. Tim Davis, thanks so much.